being visionary, as you can tell, like is actually something that if you decided to, you could do more regularly for most people.
Yeah. And I think, people don't do it for a variety of reasons. Some of it is out of fear, right? It's like, seems scary to try to commit to one thing, right? And so they try to avoid that. They can't see the vision. But the thing that I found more times isn't that there isn't a big picture, optimistic vision of the future that's based in some core values that are really important, is that people just can't communicate it effectively.
I actually think it's oftentimes both.
Yeah.
Well, so one of the things I want to, because I talk to young people, I actually just spoke at a college, this week. And people talk about your values and whatnot. And one thing I said to these young people too, it's like, honestly, I didn't know my values until I was older than you guys. It's like my values at your age were, get good grades and try and get a date and, beat the video game level I'm currently on. Like, it's like there wasn't much sophisticated moral philosophy going on. And so to some extent, I think identifying a thing that you want to put out in the world is number one. But I agree with you. Number two is that especially in today's day and age, like a lot of people are reluctant to communicate what it is that they want.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think part of it is not just, again, taking what you understand in your head and translating to what other people can understand in their head. And so that's really what communication is. And it requires this thing I've studied for 25 years since I was at Princeton, the psych department, perspective taking, right? And really being able to take the perspective. But I want to come back to values. And one of the most important things is to know your values. So one of the things that we require everyone at Columbia Business School to do the first week they're there is to spend at multiple different points in time thinking about their core values. We want them to pick their 5 core values and put them into a hierarchy where one is more important than others. And then we actually laminate a card for them that they can keep in their wallet. And I have my values card in my wallet myself. But there's so much research. I just want to tell you about one of my favorite studies that I worked on. So we did a study, just came out in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences about 1.5 years ago, but we worked with the Swiss Employment Agency. And we brought people in people came in to register to get unemployment benefits. And for half the people coming in over a period of time, we asked them to think about their values, the values hierarchy. But we also said, why are these values important to you? But also, how have you demonstrated those values in your life recently? And 2 months later, they were twice as likely to have found a job. And the effect was basically so pronounced that we ended the experiment and gave everybody the values, task. And, what is it about reflecting on your values? You mentioned you didn't know your values, until later, but I didn't do the study. Jeff Cohn of Stanford did. They went into an 8th grade classroom that had at-risk kids. It was an at-risk school, and they gave half of them this values, same kind of thing, 8 times over 2 years. So 4 times a year.
So just give an example of a value, because some people might be thinking like, oh, what are my 5 values?
Yeah, I'll tell you my 5 values. So my number one value at top is generosity. And so to me, it's about being generous financially, but it's also about being generous with spirit. And so giving people the benefit of the doubt, when they're having a bad day, for example. Number 2 is what I call positive energy. And so to me, that's, part of that is passion, but part of it's humor, and sort of having this thing. Number 3 is courage. So being able to stand up, not only for myself, but for others. 4th is creativity. And then, to always be thinking of creative solutions to problems. And then the final one, is my wife spent 2 years living in Japan. She loves the word Kaizen, which is continued improvement. And the idea that we can always get better tomorrow.
Growth mindset.
Growth mindset. Yeah. And so those are my 5 values. And I think it's really valuable because to reflect on them periodically, because you might, for example, just be like, I'm so mad at this person.
Holy crap, man. Just the fact you could rattle them off. I mean, and those values are in your book. So, but like, it's clear that you've internalized them very, very deeply. And I'm going to suggest that that's true for virtually none of the people listening to this right now, where it's like, hey, what are the top 5 values? I mean, they could eventually come up with them. But to, just know them by heart the way you do is very powerful.
Well, I want to just add one point about this. So we've been inquiring this, for, 15, 20 years. And like it wasn't until about 8 years ago that I actually did it myself. Like I even kind of resisted it, even though I was teaching it, because it feels kind of scary to think about your values and to pick some and then I did it and it was the best thing I ever did.
It is the most powerful thing. By the way, a couple of things that have helped me a great deal. It's like you write down your goals and your self-concept, which is in many ways the values.
Yeah.
Because then what happens is you get presented with a choice and then you're like, well, if I'm freaking serious about accomplishing that goal or being... So let's say, I ask you to do me a favor right now, and then you're like, I don't really feel like it. But it's like, but I literally think of myself as a generous person.
Yeah.
Number one. So it's like, so I guess I'd better do it or I'm kind of full of shit. And so that, like, I have the list of life's goals. And then when I was presented with a choice, then it's like, well, if I'm serious...
Yeah.
If I'm serious about improving the lives of millions of people before I leave this earth, then I should probably do something dramatic like run for president.
Great.
And so in that case, like I did have that as a life goal, and I was like, I want to improve the lives of millions of people. And then if you say you're going to improve the lives of millions of people, and you don't actually pursue an opportunity to do so, then you're not actually being true to yourself. But you kind of need to like codify it and turn to it and look at it. And the same is true of values. Like if you hold yourself to, as a certain sort of human, and then, you're challenged essentially to be that human or not, then you're like, well, I guess I better be this person.
Absolutely. And I think, but you can also see how values come into play with any type of thing that you propose, right? So you propose something like, universal income, for example, right? And so for some people, that's an incredibly positive thing because it's about that each person has value and we want them to have the basic necessities. And then from that, they can grow and do things. And then other people are fearful of like that creates laziness and slothfulness. And so it goes a different way. But I just want to go back to that study at Stanford just really quickly. So they went to the 8th grade classroom and they gave them this values reflection 4 times a year over 2 years. 5 years later, they were more likely to graduate high school and more likely to go to college. So there's something even you might
very
say
powerful about it.
Yeah, there's something. And so I think there's 2 things that happen when you reflect on your values. It connects you to something larger than yourself. But it also, gives you this fuels with a little bit of optimism, which is one of the most important things, right? It's like optimism really is such an unbelievable driver of things. One study I did in negotiations, for example, we just asked people to think about, what they hope to accomplish in this negotiation versus what did they want to prevent from happening in the negotiation? And the people that focused on the more positive one got better outcomes, and so there's something really positive about, like you said, growth mindset, but in a very particular, like optimistic way of doing that. And so values, I think, become really, really important. I have an article coming out in Harvard Business Review in the next issue, and I tell a story of a CEO in 2009. So I was working for the company. I was doing workshops for him. I just happened to be doing a workshop on a day. This was May of 2009, during the financial crisis. And the person came on. It was, I can't remember. They had like 14,000 employees. So it was people all over the world that were on this call. And everyone was bracing for downsizing, for layoffs. And he got on and he said, I've been trying to figure out what to do, right? We're losing money. We got to figure out a plan to get back on track. But our number one value that we state is empowering employees. And laying off people is very empowering. And so he came up with the solution of...
I empower you to make your own way.
Yeah, exactly. But he did essentially temporary pay cuts for everyone. And it was progressive. So like low-level employees got like a 15% cut, like vice presidents 40%, and he took no money. And he said, this we're going to do for the next 3 months, And what I also love about this story is he said, I'm taking away something from you, but I'm going to give you something. Because we have less work in the summer, we're going to close all offices at noon on Friday. And so you can go for a picnic with your kids. You can go to the beach. You can do whatever you want. And then hopefully come, August, we can make a decision to take away those temporary pay cuts and have full, employment later on. And so that was, you mentioned caring about employees. The other thing he did in that thing is he talked about looking out for each other, which I thought was really nice. But he answered questions for like 90 minutes. And my favorite part of his answering questions is the number of questions that someone asked that had already been answered. Like you said, you got to repeat it again and again. They're like, wait, is this permanent? Like, as I said 7 times, we're going to do this for 3 months and then we're going to reassess. And then, but he was so calm and understood, that when people are fearful, they can't hear, right? Fear doesn't hear. And that's another thing I think about vision is that when you're with a group of people and it's a tumultuous time, like you're going to have to repeat even more. Right, because people are not
they're not in
hear.
super listening mode.
Nope.
They're thinking about their own livelihoods and families and everything else. Hey YouTube, thanks for watching. Please do hit like and subscribe and hit that bell if you want to be notified every time a new episode drops. Thank you.